Okay, so we actually had a new state of play from Sony this week. 007 First Light has now emerged. We've actually seen proper gameplay. And I think what we saw on the state of play was the PlayStation 5 professional version. But we actually saw the PC version running at Gamescom. We were under embargo until that state of play, quote unquote, dropped. I actually thought what I saw was really, really cool. Surprising in many ways. I mean, surprising and also not surprising. I mean, in terms of the sort of Hitman style infiltration gameplay we saw, this is like classic IO Interactive. I thought that was pretty cool. But then we get a series of like Uncharted style set pieces, which isn't really what we expect from IO Interactive, but certainly within the capabilities of the engine based on stuff we've seen, like the benchmark sequence in Hitman, where the physics are going crazy there, which didn't really manifest in the actual game. John, curious about your thoughts on this one. I think it was looking really, really promising. It certainly assuaged a lot of my concerns about it. But it's clear there's still a long way to go there, particularly in terms of optimization.
So we saw it at Gamescom first, which was fun. It was quite difficult to get in actually, but we did get in.
We did get in.
And they actually had like a whole theater with one. They seemingly rented a 97-inch OLED screen, and they had it hooked up to a PC. And there was a guy there playing the game live on PC. It was the demo that was shown during the state of play, but it was done by somebody actually playing the game. And you could tell because there was a couple little snafus at points where things didn't quite go right. Not the game's fault. It was actually Windows encroaching in and causing some problems.
Yeah.
So, which was not great, but the game continued. Obviously, PC, it ran noticeably better than the state of play gameplay, unsurprisingly, but I don't recall it being super, like, I think they were just aiming for 60-ish.
It was 60-ish, and it had some dips also in the PC code, like that was also there.
It did, but it's still, that's the thing though, this is pre-release, and we can't judge performance yet. We can just look at the ambition and what they're doing, and I think the gameplay, both what we saw and what we've since learned afterward, super interesting. They've essentially made sort of Hitman Uncharted with a bit of immersive sim elements tossed in.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like the bulk of the game does include a lot of like almost ImSim style stuff, like infiltrating places, figuring out how to get through places, and multiple ways to do it that are all done not just through like scripted things, but actual like based on the tool set you have as well as what's in the environment, similar to Hitman, but a little bit more guided perhaps. But then they also have these more like cinematic Uncharted style sequences, and I'm sure they don't like comparisons to Uncharted, but I think that's actually the fact that we can compare it to that, I think speaks volumes as to how good they're doing.
Absolutely.
Because trying to match, right, it's a compliment. Trying to match what Naughty Dog was doing with something like Uncharted 4, which is what it reminded me of. That's pretty awesome. Like, they've never made a game like this before with this sort of like fluidity to the animation, the physics, the destruction, all these like scripted sequences, everything sort of coming together. Like, I mean, they tried a bit more actiony with Kane and Lynch series, but it did not look like this, to say the least. Although Kane and Lynch 2 is a cool looking game.
It is a cool looking. Yes, Kane and Lynch 2 is cool. Kane and Lynch 1 is kind of ugly,
it's
actually.
Jank. Yeah. It's jank. So I was really like, I was so impressed with like the overall changes made to both the engine and then the presentation in general, the materials and everything. The lighting was great. Animations are great. They had that, I think it was like 90s, early 2000s era Jaguar XJ in there, which was, that's a classy design I still love. And the paint quality on that was excellent. That sort of pearlescent green, turquoise-ish, not turquoise, it's like an emerald green, actually. It's like a nice pearlescent emerald green. Beautiful. I love that on a car. It looked really good as well. But then, of course, all the explosion stuff that we just mentioned, lots of physics interactions, and, of course, large-scale environments, because between that sort of infiltration and the big airfield battle, and then in the sky, all of this is done seamlessly, and there's tons of driving with like a huge distance covered. And I don't think IO's engine has ever handled locations anywhere near this size before. And in fact, I don't think they had any kind of like serious streaming stuff happening in the background either. Hitman levels were like, you load it up, it's a constrained, very detailed, but single environment, and you're just in there and you do the thing. And then it, it loads up the next one and you move on. So they've clearly made some big investments here in their own tech, which I think is super cool to see. But of course, PS5, right? PS5 Pro they showed. And so I'm happy that they were so honest about showing where the game's at, right? This can only bode well, I think, in the future, because it's probably going to improve. And by the time it improves, that will have a positive public sentiment similar to Outlaws, if you will. Not that this was like the Outlaws Switch early footage or anything, but we saw a lot of dips under 30 FPS, a lot of dips, like into the 20s, possibly lower at times. We haven't actually benched it, but it gets pretty chunky at times. Which definitely shows that they're pushing things pretty hard. But it also made me wonder about, like, how is this going to work on Switch 2? How's this going to work on Series S? Like, they've got their work cut out for them if the PS5 Pro is already running this way, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm excited to see whatever, because I think what they're doing here looks freaking awesome. And I really can't wait to play it.
Mm-hmm. So, Alex, we saw the presentation at Gamescom. Obviously, we've now got this new material from the PlayStation 5 Professional. We also spoke to the developers at Gamescom.
Yeah.
Curious at your take on where we are so far with this game.
Well, I was much more skeptical after the first trailer, and then seeing the game live actually quelled pretty much all of my concerns regarding characterization. And specifically, I was really worried about the young, smarmy James Bond, which didn't come across that way. It was actually a lot more subtle, and they actually did talk about that in the interview, balancing and avoiding quippiness and all these things that are kind of modern tropes, and that was really cool to hear from them. From the tech side, like John, I was impressed. I was actually impressed by the distance rendering too.
Right.
That was really well done. Something that you kind of get occasionally as backdrops in the Hitman levels, but that's when you're just, that's a static thing. But here they're going through it. Yeah. And they're going through it. And so that's having to LOD, it's having to change things. All the trees you're seeing in the distance eventually come much closer at one point. So that is really cool to see that all in play. The one thing I was surprised not really to see, like they didn't seem like in Hitman 3, they pushed for some ray tracing there that was really interesting. It was very heavy at the time of release. Nowadays, I think it's probably still heavy, but it at least with more modern, like, Ada Lovelace or Blackwell GPUs, it is pretty well off there. And I was surprised not to see it in the demo, at least in any visible form. It seemed like shadow maps and the kind of stuff they'd been doing for Hitman before they added in ray tracing. And here it's definitely a game, I think, given the ambitions of the locales in terms of size, I think ray tracing probably makes a lot more sense than like we put a purposeful like cube map right here. That's probably like a lot of art time.
Right.
But who knows about scaling? This is all very early. So I would just be very curious to see if that ends up in the product again. I think that's probably also dependent upon who is sponsoring the title on PC. Last time it was Intel, it was cool to see that. They were one of the XeSS titles. But here, I'd be curious if it's still Intel. Maybe it isn't. I have no idea. Also seeing that CPU is finally getting to work, like Rich talked, was very nice because the engine has a super robust physics system in it and can do a lot of stuff in terms of how many individual objects are moving at once, not just for NPCs, but for actually like physicalized things. And seeing that actually put to strain and be useful from a gameplay perspective, like the one scene where he gets out of the tube and he starts shooting at the guys and all the stuff's exploding, that was actually stuff that I almost wanted to see in Hitman all these years, but there's no good reason to act that way in Hitman. And the levels, if you're killing civilians in those levels, that's pretty awful. So here, within the context of like an action-based game, when you have the license to kill activated, then it's a lot of fun. And I'm actually super excited to see that in person, playing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it seems to be the case that where there are performance drops in this work in progress demo, it seems to be pretty physics-based. So that's kind of slightly concerning because that level of optimization on the CPU side is much more difficult to do than adjusting things GPU side, where there's a lot more scalability. So going to be curious to see how that works out in the final game. On the conceptual side, I think the bottom line was everybody had concerns about a kind of quote unquote young Bond. Who is this guy? I mean, if it's not the fully formed Bond, why should we be interested? And I think on the one side, based on what we actually saw in the demo, there it is still the same character fundamentally, and it's still a really interesting character. All the core characteristics are there. I think that's pretty great. I think the one thing which is slightly jarring from a narrative perspective is that this might be a young Bond, but he's getting up to all sorts of hijinks that sort of surpass what happens in the movies. So this is essentially a young Bond who's basically capable of anything and everything that the older Bonds can do and more, based on some of the stuff we're seeing here. But in terms of what you want from a game, that's just fantastic, right? I mean, the action that they've brought to the table here just looks absolutely phenomenal. I'm really looking.
Plus the whole. Did you see the license to kill thing, where you actually have to get a license to kill at certain points? It's not something you can just always do.
I think that's a smart idea, actually.
That's cute. That's fun. It's really cool.
It also balances the in the ImSim genre. Like, it's hard to balance being non-lethal and lethal and punishing the player and allowing it. And I think that's actually a good way to step around this issue. Devs actually struggle with. So.
I also loved, there was Alex Donaldson pointed this out on, social media I saw, where like when Bond jumps down inside that sewer pipe and then there's an enemy waiting at the other end, that enemy is essentially treated to the classic James Bond view down the barrel of a gun thing that they always open with.
Yeah.
But like they're using the sewer pipe as like the visualization for that. I think that's super fun.
There was an interesting point in the interview we had, Alex, where we were talking about the parallels to the Hitman style gameplay and how it's a good fit for Bond. But at the same time, I was asking if they had to add guardrails to the experience, because all manner of crazy stuff can happen in Hitman. And it was quite interesting, though, that shouldn't be happening in a Bond game, right? In fact, Hitman's kind of famous for the kind of sort of emergent gameplay and crazy moments that can happen. And it was interesting the way they phrased it, where they were saying that Agent 47 is like an agent of chaos. And it kind of fits in with the character there, but they did have to sort of rein in some of the crazy stuff for Bond because, it's just not Bond-like. I thought that was pretty fantastic. I think they also talked to Alex about the fact they did have to introduce some sort of pretty hardcore streaming technology to do stuff like the driving, because it's just not something that you do in Hitman, which kind of makes sense, right?
Yep.
Final thoughts there, John. I'm really excited about this now. I mean, obviously there's a ways to go in terms of getting a smooth experience, but holy crap, this exceeded expectations in just about every regard, I'd say.
I would say the ambitions are off the chart.
Yeah, yes.
For IO Interactive,
would you say they're uncharted?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Well, to me, this feels like them trying to create a Naughty Dog class experience while also bringing to the table the types of things that they're known for. The additional depth and all that.
Yeah.
And that's a tall order. Like, it's honestly insane that they're attempting this, and then they seem to actually be pulling it off. I think that's really cool. I'm a sucker for these types of experiences.
Absolutely.
I love this stuff.
Also interesting that very few developers actually try and do Uncharted style experiences these days.
I mean, part of the reason is just it's extremely freaking expensive,
yes.
Right? All those custom animations and all the systems they implement, the stuff that they do is rare for a reason, because it's expensive, difficult to execute, and if you try and whiff, it ends up looking pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, good on them. I really hope this hits big for them, because IO Interactive, it's a company with a lot of history.
Yeah.
They've been around a long time. I've always had a lot of respect and love for their work. I mean, their original Hitman stuff all the way back in the day was awesome. It's always been awesome. And yeah, they've had their ups and downs. Kane and Lynch 1, not so good. Freedom Fighters, though, pretty good.
Awesome. Actually.
But man, so I'm really happy that they're able to tackle this and we're able to work on such a big property as James Bond, and also bring back that series to games where I feel like it hasn't been for a while. And traditionally, you know, Bond games are mostly pretty good, I would argue. Like the PS2 generation of Bond games, you know, everybody loved GoldenEye, but then after that, EA actually did some really good Bond games, right? Everything or Nothing, especially, super good. And even after that, I always have a soft spot for Bloodstone from Bizarre Creations. Super, super underappreciated little game. One of their last games before Bizarre was shut down.
I remember
Uses
that
their
one.
awesome tech.
That's crazy.
Check it out. It's actually really cool. It's a nice third-person shooter plus driving action game with excellent graphics that actually runs perfectly on PS3 and 360 while exhibiting great visuals. So, you know, but yeah, definitely interested in this.